What's up everybody, Teancum here with Sew Yeah Quilting. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you make a puff quilt. Let's get started. Let's dive right on into the cutting instructions. So to make a puff quilt, what we need is a piece of fabric that is 4x4 and another piece of fabric that is 5x5 and a little bit of poly film. And this is enough material to make a single puff. As you can see in the quilt behind me, there are 238 puffs here in this quilt. You can make these quilt whatever sizes you'd like. They're super fun to make and they're super easy to do. So let me show you how you put together a puff quilt. Well, our very first thing is going to be is the bigger piece of fabric, our 5x5, is going to go wrong, or in this case would be wrong sides together. And we're going to lay it on top of it. Obviously, it's going to overhang around. This is the trick to these puff quilts. I'm going to take it over to our sewing machine. What we're going to do is we're going to sew down about an inch, inch and a half. And then we want our machine to stop in the needle down position. Then we're going to line up our other edge here. And with this excess fabric, we're going to pleat it right in the middle. I'm going to pleat this fabric on 3 sides. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew down about, like 1¼ inches. Line up my other edge. And we want to be using a 1/4 inch seam through the entire quilting process. So again, about an inch and a half. Gonna line this up. Then I'm going to pleat it right in the middle. So what this is doing is it's creating a little pillow. That way our batting can fit right in there. Something that you do not want to do is overstuff a puff quilt, or else it makes it extremely hard to connect all of our rows. So you'll want about a 3" by 3" ball of polyfill, and we're going to just stuff it in there. And then we're going to finish pleating our 4th side. And if you overstuff it, what the actual problem is that you won't be able to get it underneath your sewing machine. There won't be enough space for it. So it's always a good idea to use a little bit less on a puff quilt. Then, once we have all 4 sides sewn, all you're going to do is just move the puff, or the polyfill, that's what it's called, around inside of it to make your actual puff. Now, I've already gone ahead and made quite a few of these, but all I've done is just connected them into rows. That way I can show you how you put rows together. You put rows together exactly like you would a normal quilt. Other than, again, cannot stress enough, if you overfill these, you can't put these right sides together very well. So I'm going to just put this right sides together on top of my row here. That way I'm going to pinch it real tight. I'm going to take this over to our sewing machine and use another 1/4 inch seam. And that is how you add a puff onto a row. Now, this right here is the quilt that I've been working on. It's gonna be for my little girl. I've got a 1-year-old, so this will be a great place for her to lay down. And the thing that we want to keep in mind here is that when we're putting together our rows, we always want to put our rows together in opposite directions. So if I sew this row on, I'm going to sew from bottom to top. Next row I'm going to sew top to bottom. This just helps keep our puff quilt straight. So now I need to add on my row. I'm going to add it onto my right side, or sorry, my left side here. And I'm going to just line it up the best I can. Make sure we're still in the frame. I'm going to put it right sides together. And I'm going to want to use some wonder clips here. So where'd they go? Right there. I'm going to want to use some wonder clips here, just to make sure I can get my seams together how I want them to be. And this is going to take a little bit of time, but our batting's already in our quilt, so it's going to be a little bit quicker at the end. I'm going to keep going down. And I'm going to pin, I'm pinning every one or every other one depending on how many puffs you have in the quilt. I'm going to just take a little bit of extra time to make sure I get everything lined up. Now it's time to go over to the sewing machine. And so that is how you add a row onto a puff quilt. Now, let me show you how you finish puff quilts. You finish them a little bit differently than what we think or what we're used to. I'm going to back my puff quilt in a piece of minke. And we are going to put our puff quilt on it, right sides together. Just like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple pins or some wonder clips and clip this all down, and we're going to sew all the way around our quilt, leaving about a realistically 12-inch opening on it, a little bit more than the common or the normal that we're used to hearing. That way we can turn this whole quilt around. Then we can start the quilting process. If not, it's relatively, at least in my opinion, impossible to bind these quilts. But if we use this method, our binding will just come out automatically. So I'm going to finish pinning this up or clipping this up, and we'll be right back. Now that I got everything pinned together or clipped together, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew a 1/4-inch seam all the way around, leaving again that opening. You want to leave a hefty opening just in case. That way we can make sure everything gets tucked away or wherever we get out of the hole, I guess. Something else to be mindful of that I didn't mention or forgot to mention is that I cut my minke the exact size of my quilt. That way I know that I need to use up all the fabric here, and I need to make sure everything's straight with my minke. I'm going to turn my little quilt here. I'm going to do a back stitch right here. So I'm because I don't want to end my seam on my corner here. So I'm going to just turn the thing around and put it back in here. Now I've got my 4 edges sewn and a hole right here, that way I can turn the whole thing through. We're going to flip our entire quilt through. Then to finish up sewing up this seam right here, I'm going to just put the minke. I'm going to show that over here on the camera. I'm going to just put the minke on top of the puffs. I'm going to use some clips here. And I'm going to sew a very, very small seam right up against the edge of the minke to seal off that hole. Bring it over to the sewing machine. Now that we have our binding pre-sewn on, it's time to do the quilting portion of this. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. You can go square by square and sew all the way around and do a pattern on the back. You can do channel stitching all the way through each and every one of them. What I personally prefer to do is do every other one all the way down. So let me show you how you do that. I'm going to just take this over to the sewing machine. I'm going to count over 2 rows. And drop my pressure foot. I'm going to take the weight of the quilt up, and I'm going to just sew as close as I can to a stitch in the ditch. And this is why overstuffing can be a problem, because if your foot can't fit in between the puffs, then there's not really a good way to quilt these. And you're going to just keep repeating that process all the way down through your quilt. And it'll give you a stitch line right in the back. So that is how you make a puff quilt. If you've liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't be afraid to share it with your friends. As always, we're going to leave instructions on how to make this in the description below. My name's Teancum, teaching you how to sew like a pro. We'll see you here next week at Sew Yeah Quilting.